"Is this seat only for the rich?" asked the poor girl to the CEO, sitting alone at the Christmas Café. Snow drifted gently outside, blanketing the quiet street in soft white. It was Christmas Eve, and the city, despite its chaos, seemed to pause for a moment of peace. Tucked between an old bookstore and a fading flower shop sat a small café, warm, classic, glowing with golden light. The windows fogged with heat. Cinnamon and cocoa filled the air, mixing with roasted coffee. Wreaths hung from the walls. Soft jazz carols played behind the clinking of spoons and low laughter. Every table was full. Couples leaned close. Families shared pastries. Friends exchanged wrapped gifts. Every chair was taken. Except one. Adrian Wolfe sat alone near the window, where snow shimmered silver beneath the street lamp. He was impeccably dressed, charcoal coat, dark slacks, polished boots. His watch, subtle but expensive, peeked from beneath his cuff. A cup of coffee cooled in front of him, barely touched. He stared through the window, posture straight, expression unreadable, as if still carrying a boardroom's tension in his shoulders. The seat across from him was empty. The cafe door chimed softly. Lila Grace stepped in, brushing snow from her shoulders. 19, wrapped in a faded but clean coat 2 sizes too big. Blonde hair tied back in a loose ponytail, with strands escaping to frame her pink cheeks. A handmade scarf circled her neck. She clutched a canvas tote to her chest. Inside were 3 pastries, unsold leftovers from the bakery where she worked mornings. The owner had slipped them to her with a quiet smile before closing. Lila had smiled back, grateful. She looked around. Every seat was taken, except one. Her gaze landed on the empty chair across from the man at the window. The contrast was striking. He looked like a man of high-rises and black cars. She, like someone who had just come in from cleaning the counters of a warm kitchen. Still, her eyes were steady. She walked toward the table, boots slightly damp, one squeaking softly on the floorboards. She stopped by the empty seat, looking down at the man who hadn't acknowledged her. Then, with a quiet boldness and a trace of wry humor, she asked, "Is this seat only for the rich?" The moment hung, not because anyone else heard, no one had, but because something in the air between them stilled. Adrian didn't answer immediately. He took a slow breath, then lifted his gaze. Cool gray eyes met hers, eyes older than 32, tired but sharp. He looked at her, not in judgment, but like someone recalling something forgotten. Then he said, simply, "No, it's for the honest." Lila smiled, just a little. Not surprised, not impressed, just present. "Good," she replied. She sat down. Neither of them spoke for a while. The snow outside continued to fall, soft and steady. Inside, the cafe buzzed gently with warmth and music. And at that little table by the window, between 2 people from very different worlds, something quiet and extraordinary had begun, the kind of story that always starts with one empty seat, and someone brave enough to ask for it. The cafe had grown quieter as the evening wore on. Outside, the snow fell more steadily now, frosting the windows with delicate patterns. Inside, the soft crackle of a fake fireplace filled the silence between them. Lila held her warm cup of cocoa with both hands, as if drawing strength from it. She didn't seem rushed or nervous. She didn't try to fill the space with chatter. But when she spoke, her voice was calm and open, like someone who had grown used to finding comfort in small things. "I live with my grandma," she said. "Just the 2 of us. She's not well, can't move much anymore, so I work a lot. Mornings at the bakery, evenings at a diner. Sometimes I sell flowers near the train station." Adrian didn't say anything, but he wasn't looking away either. Lila smiled, soft and unbothered. "It's not glamorous, but it keeps the lights on." She paused, then touched the edge of her coat. Near the collar, fastened like a brooch, was a small, slightly worn button in the shape of a star. It shimmered faintly under the warm cafe lights. "My mom used to call this my lucky star," she said. "Said it was a smiling wish, the kind that follows you around even when you forget it's there." Adrian's eyes flicked to the star, then to her face. There was something different in his gaze now. Not curiosity, exactly, but something softer, less guarded. Lila didn't seem to notice. "She passed when I was 13, she added, her fingers still resting on the button. "But I kept this. I guess it reminds me not to stop hoping, even when I'm tired." Adrian leaned back slightly, his fingers brushing the side of his untouched coffee cup. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet and firm. "Hope is dangerous," he said. "Dreams, wishes, they set you up to fall. You think they mean something, but mostly, they just disappoint you." Lila tilted her head, thoughtful, but not offended. She didn't try to fix what he said, didn't try to fix him. Instead, she smiled. Not a dismissive smile, not pitying, just understanding. "Maybe," she said gently. "Dreams only disappoint those who forget why they had them." For a moment, the air between them stilled. Adrian didn't reply, but he looked at her, really looked, and for the first time since she sat down, it wasn't with skepticism or indifference. It wasn't even surprise. It was something else. A flicker of recognition, of something unspoken, long buried. Lila went back to sipping her cocoa. She didn't expect him to say more. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She simply was who she was. A girl with worn boots, a tote bag of day-old pastries, and a button shaped like a star. Adrian looked away, back toward the window, but something had shifted. His jaw was no longer tight. His shoulders had relaxed slightly. The snow outside no longer looked quite so lonely. Behind the counter, the barista hummed along to the carol playing overhead. In the far corner, two teenagers exchanged small gifts, giggling behind gloved hands. And at the table by the window, the CEO and the girl with the lucky star sat in silence again, not empty this time, but full in a different way. A silence that didn't need to be broken. Because something, however small, had begun. It was Sunday morning. The snow had stopped, leaving slushy sidewalks and a gray, quiet calm. The sky hung low, heavy with clouds, but the air felt still, almost gentle. Adrian Wolfe hadn't slept. His mind, usually sharp and guarded, had refused to quiet. Something about her, her calm voice, that star-shaped button, lingered. He wandered into the older part of the city, not consciously choosing the route. It was where he and his mother had once lived, long before his name meant anything. The buildings looked tired, but peaceful, familiar. He turned a corner into a small community park. A few elderly people sat with folded newspapers. Children played in bright coats. Ordinary, until he saw her. Across the park, on a snow-dusted bench, sat an elderly woman. A floral-patterned dress covered her legs, but the hem was torn. Kneeling beside her, on the cold pavement, was Lila. Adrian froze. She wore the same oversized coat. Her blonde hair was tied up. In her lap was a small tin with a faded crescent moon. She pulled out a needle and thread and a strip of old fabric, faded blue with tiny roses. Her hands moved slowly, deliberately. Lips pressed together in soft focus. The fabric didn't match the dress, but it didn't have to. It made the tear look intentional, transformed. He stepped closer, not knowing why. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked quietly. Lila looked up, startled, but relaxed when she saw him. "From my grandma," she said. "She used to sew before her hands gave out. I'm just continuing what she taught me." She glanced at her work. "I like fixing things people forget." Adrian looked at the repaired hem. The stitching was delicate. The fabric, thoughtfully chosen. But why? That dress probably isn't worth much. Lila smiled, not offended, not defensive. Some people don't need fancy things. They just want to feel noticed. A pretty dress won't change their life, but it might remind them they matter. Adrian didn't respond, but the words stayed. She folded the dress gently and placed it in the woman's lap. The older woman's eyes watered as she held Lila's hand for a beat, longer than expected. Then a voice rang out. "Miss Lila." A little girl in red boots ran toward her. She threw her arms around Lila's waist. "The dress you made for my mommy was so pretty." She smiled all day, even when our heater broke. Lila chuckled and crouched down. "Your mommy deserves every smile." The girl looked toward the bench and whispered, "That's my friend's grandma. She cried this morning 'cause her dress ripped, but now she's happy." Adrian remained still, heart catching in his chest. There were no cameras, no followers, no audience, just Lila and a world she refused to ignore. She didn't need attention, she just needed thread. As the little girl skipped away, Lila packed her sewing tin. She glanced up at Adrian, gave a polite nod, and walked off. Adrian stood there, watching her disappear down the path. Then, without planning it, he stepped toward the bench. The old woman was smoothing the dress with proud hands. Adrian pulled a note card from his wallet. With the pen he always carried, he wrote, "Your friend reminded me of something beautiful today. Thank you for letting her mend your dress, and maybe something in me too." He placed the card beside her and walked away without another word. It wasn't grand, but it was the first honest thank you Adrian Wolfe had written in years. Not to a boardroom, not to a shareholder, but to life, for crossing his path with hers. The afternoon was wrapped in winter stillness. Snow covered the streets in a soft white blanket, muffling the sound of the city. Christmas lights flickered gently across small storefronts, casting warm colors over the sidewalks, but the roads remained calm, never crowded. Outside the community center, Adrian stood quietly, hands in the pockets of his long coat. He watched the front steps until the door opened, and Lila stepped out, her blonde ponytail catching a glint of fading light. "Hey," she greeted with a smile. "I know a quiet place," Adrian said. "Would you like to take a walk?" She looked at him for a moment, then nodded. They walked slowly through a narrow lane, where balconies were draped with strings of holiday lights and children's paper snowflakes taped to fogged windows. Their footsteps left crisp imprints in the snow, side by side. Adrian waited until the silence between them felt steady before he spoke. "My brother's name was Evan," he said, softly. "He was 10 years younger than me. All heart. He loved to draw, paint, design things, dresses mostly. I never quite understood it, but he did it with so much joy." Lila glanced at him, but said nothing. She listened. "When our mother died, I was 20. Evan was still a kid. I had to work. I did everything I could, odd jobs, night shifts, even slept in the office sometimes. I wanted to make sure he never had to worry the way I did." He stopped walking briefly, brushing snow off a bench before they both sat. "One night, he sent me a sketch," Adrian continued. "His first dress design. He was 16. I had just finished a 16-hour board meeting. I looked at the drawing and replied, 'Nice, but maybe think about something more practical.'" His voice caught slightly. "I didn't mean to discourage him. I didn't want the world to hurt him. I didn't want him to hope for something that might break him." Lila's eyes softened. She didn't interrupt. "He started pulling away not long after that. I thought it was just teenage moodiness, a phase. I told myself I was doing the right thing, focusing on building something that could support both of us." A beat passed. But one day, he was just gone. Adrian's gaze fell to his gloved hands. He left behind his sketchbook, unfinished. There was no bitterness in his voice, just a quiet, enduring ache. He reached into his coat and pulled out something carefully folded, a pale blue scarf. He knitted this for me when he was 16. I never wore it. It felt like I didn't deserve to, not until I met you. Before Lila could respond, Adrian gently reached over and wrapped the scarf around her neck. His touch was careful, tender. The gesture held more weight than words ever could. Lila's fingers instinctively brushed the soft yarn. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "He wanted to make beautiful things," Adrian said, eyes distant, "and I was too busy being practical." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. "I did not mean to break his heart, but maybe I did. And now, I just wish I could tell him how proud I was of his bravery, his passion." Snowflakes began to drift down again, brushing against the tips of their coats and lashes. Lila turned toward him. "No one is born knowing how to get everything right," she said gently. "Your brother didn't want a perfect brother. He wanted you to see him. And I think maybe he's still waiting to hear that." Adrian dropped his gaze. His shoulders trembled once. And then, for the first time in years, he cried, not out of rage or regret, but from the quiet release of holding it all in too long. Lila didn't speak. She simply reached out and rested her hand on his shoulder. A light touch, warm and grounding. Not pity, just presence. Adrian looked up after a long moment, eyes still wet but clearer. He managed a faint smile. Lila's voice was barely more than breath. "Maybe your brother is gone, but his dream isn't. It's living again, in every stitch I make." He nodded slowly. They stood, brushing off the snow. Then, without a word, they continued walking. Not hand in hand, but close, side by side. And beneath the softly falling snow, two people carried invisible wounds, still tender, still healing, but now they were not carrying them alone. Winter had arrived in full. The snow no longer danced lightly but fell thick and steady, blanketing the city in soft white. The kind of cold that got into your bones, the kind that made silence feel heavier. Lila had been more tired than usual. She never said it aloud, never complained, but Adrian noticed. He noticed the dark circles beneath her eyes, the way she cleared her throat more often, the way she quietly excused herself early, saying, "I have to take my grandmother to the clinic." He didn't press, but he remembered it all. One evening, Lila returned to the little Christmas Café, her coat damp from the snow. She had just finished her shift and wanted a few quiet moments before walking home. The cafe owner smiled and handed her a small brown paper bag. "A man left this for you," she said. Lila opened it carefully. Inside was a tin of herbal ginger tea, a small bottle of soothing throat syrup, and a folded note that read, in careful handwriting, "Keep your throat warm for mornings that still need your smile." There was no name, no signature. But Lila knew. The next day, when she saw Adrian in his usual corner, she sat beside him and said softly, "Thank you." He didn't pretend not to understand. He only replied, "Your grandmother, she's your whole world. Taking care of her is how I take care of you." Lila smiled, touched by the simplicity of it. She said nothing more. They sat quietly, sharing a moment between snowflakes and cinnamon. Later that week, on a park bench, Lila spoke gently, almost like she wasn't sure if the words were worth saying. "I once wanted to study fashion design," she said. "I filled out applications more times than I can count." Adrian turned toward her, listening. "But I never sent them." "Why not?" he asked. She sighed softly. "The application fee could pay for 3 months of my grandmother's medicine, so I chose what mattered more." She glanced down at her gloves. "Dreams are beautiful," she said, "but life doesn't wait for you to finish dreaming before it sends the bills." Adrian said nothing. No advice, no offers, just quiet understanding. That night, Adrian sat in his dimly lit apartment. The fireplace flickered, casting shadows. In front of him was his laptop and a few of Lila's old sketchbooks, the ones she had once let him borrow. He opened a browser and searched for the design school she had mentioned in passing. He read the requirements, then filled out the application. Name: Lila Grace. Supporting letter: from an anonymous scholarship fund. Why are you nominating this student? He typed, because some dreams are too brave to be ignored. He didn't sign it. He didn't want credit. This wasn't about charity. It was a quiet act of repair, for Lila and maybe for someone else he had once failed. Days later, Lila was in the kitchen, helping her grandmother with breakfast when she casually checked her phone. Then she froze. She stared at the screen, read the email once, twice, 3 times. She had been accepted into the very design program she had once only dreamed of, with a scholarship, partial tuition and additional living support. She pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes stinging. Her grandmother noticed. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Lila shook her head, laughing through tears. "Nothing's wrong, Grandma. Not this time." She hugged her tightly. This time, the dream came true. That afternoon, she ran, through the snow, past people and cars and streetlights glowing in the cold. She reached the cafe, breath visible in the winter air. She pushed the door open, heart pounding. Adrian wasn't there. But on their usual table sat a cup of hot chocolate, and beside it, a folded note. She opened it with trembling fingers. For dreams too brave to be ignored. Just that. Lila sat down slowly. She didn't cry this time. She didn't need to. Because in that quiet moment, she realized something powerful. Someone had seen her, really seen her. Someone had believed in her before she believed in herself. And from that day forward, the future wasn't something distant or impossible. It was hers to reach. 3 months later, the snow had melted. The city wore early spring like a soft scarf, chilly but full of promise. Inside a repurposed warehouse near the arts district, string lights hung low across wooden beams, casting a warm golden glow over mismatched chairs and recycled tables. A small handmade banner read, "Restitched. A student exhibition on dreams, fabric, and second chances." Lila stood near the entrance, her blonde hair tied back in a neat low bun, cheeks flushed from both nerves and excitement. She wore a simple black dress she had altered herself, with subtle embroidered stars along the collar. It was her first showcase, small, intimate, and held as part of her program's end-of-term presentation. The theme: transforming what was forgotten into something worth remembering. Each design told a story. A coat made from old curtains, a dress lined with patches from children's shirts, a jacket restored with handwriting printed onto the sleeves, words from letters never sent. But one piece stood apart, centered on a small platform, with gentle spotlights framing it. A green dress. It wasn't loud or extravagant, but it shimmered in its own quiet way. The fabric was pieced together from vintage scarves, faded bedsheets, even part of a hospital gown. Yet when worn by the model, it moved like music, fluid, full of grace, the color of spring after a long, silent winter. In the back of the room, unnoticed by most, Adrian stood quietly, his hands in the pockets of his coat. He hadn't planned to come. He told himself it was just a student showcase, that she wouldn't notice whether he was there or not. But when the email invitation had come, sent to the anonymous scholarship donor account, he found himself unable to ignore it. And now, here he was, watching her move from piece to piece, talking to guests, explaining textures and choices. Her eyes glowed, her voice steady and warm. Then, the lights dimmed slightly. Lila stepped forward onto the makeshift stage with a small microphone. "I want to thank everyone who's come tonight," she began. "This isn't just about clothes. It's about memory, about healing, about learning to see beauty where the world told you there wasn't any. She paused. I saved one dress for last. The green one. She walked toward it slowly, placing her hand gently on its skirt. This is for someone I once met by accident. Someone who never said much, but who saw more than most. Her voice didn't shake, but it softened. It's for anyone who's ever gotten lost inside themselves. For anyone who forgot how to dream. And for anyone who found their way back through someone else's eyes. She looked up. Her gaze moved across the crowd, and then stopped. Across the room, just past the rows of lights and swaying shadows, Adrian stood, still, quiet. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the world seemed to go still. She didn't smile. He didn't wave. But something passed between them, stronger than thanks, deeper than admiration, recognition, gratitude, hope. The lights shifted again, and the moment moved on, but its imprint stayed. After the event, people mingled, compliments, laughter, paper cups filled with sparkling cider. Adrian turned to leave before the crowd thinned, before anyone might ask who he was, but as he stepped outside into the cool night, he paused. The stars were faint above the city glow. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded program from the exhibit. Underneath the title of the green dress, written in Lila's handwriting, was a final note. To the person who gave me back my mirror, thank you for helping me see. Adrian smiled. Not the polished smile of a CEO, but a quieter one. Real. He tucked the note back into his pocket and walked into the night, carrying with him not just a memory, but something softer, something like healing. The night air had turned crisp again, a soft reminder that Christmas was only weeks away. After the small exhibition wrapped, after the last guest had left, and the final fold of green fabric had been carefully stored away, Lila found Adrian waiting quietly outside the warehouse. He stood under the glow of a street lamp strung with golden fairy lights. Snow had not yet fallen, but the breeze hinted at its arrival. "Hey," she said, approaching him, her voice calm, steady. Adrian looked at her, hands in his pockets. "You were brilliant tonight." "Thank you," she said, then nodded toward the street. "Walk with me?" They began down a quiet block, lined with small shops, most already closed. Above them, string lights crisscrossed from building to building, casting delicate patterns across the sidewalk. Somewhere in the distance, a street musician played a slow version of "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their footsteps in rhythm. Then, Lila glanced at him and asked softly, "Why did you help me?" Adrian stopped walking. The question hung in the air, like the first snowflake not yet brave enough to fall. He looked ahead for a moment, then slowly turned to face her. "I didn't plan to," he said, voice low. "At least, not at first. But then I started seeing things in you that I forgot existed in the world. Kindness without agenda, courage without pride, hope that didn't ask for permission." Lila's gaze didn't waver. Adrian continued. "And then one night, you mentioned the application, the dream you buried because life demanded other things first. And I realized I couldn't let another dream disappear. Not again." She knew what he meant. He took a breath. "I was the one who sent in your application. I paid the fee, wrote the letter, under the name of a scholarship fund I created after." He stopped himself. "After my brother." Silence. Then, Lila stepped a little closer, her expression unreadable. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Adrian shook his head gently. "Because I didn't want you to feel like you owed me, and maybe I was afraid you'd look at me differently." Lila didn't respond immediately. She looked up at the string of lights above them, golden halos suspended between the buildings. Then she asked, "Adrian, have you ever forgiven yourself?" He looked at her, startled, not by the question but by how gently it was asked. He didn't answer. His eyes drifted away, down to the street, to the small cracks in the pavement no one ever noticed. After a long moment, he said quietly, "Not yet." Lila reached out, not to take his hand, but just to touch his sleeve, lightly, just enough to ground the moment. "If you haven't," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "then let me do it for you, at least for now, until you're brave enough to do it yourself." The words fell between them like soft snow, unexpected, quiet, but with weight. Adrian met her eyes, and for the first time, he didn't look away. He didn't shield himself with silence or deflect with logic. He simply let the moment in. "I don't know how to be that brave yet," he said. Lila smiled. "That's okay, I'll wait." They stood there beneath the lights, the rest of the world blurred around them. No confessions, no grand gestures, just the soft beginning of something honest. And for Adrian, who had spent a lifetime trying to outrun guilt, the simple offer of grace felt like the rarest gift. As they turned to walk again, Lila looked up at the twinkling lights and said playfully, "You know, it's almost Christmas again." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Is that your way of asking for a gift?" "No," she said, grinning. "It's my way of saying, I'm glad you're not alone this time." He smiled, and this time, it reached his eyes. Snowflakes floated gently down, kissing the windows of the little Christmas Café, just like they had 1 year ago. Inside, the place looked the same, warm golden lights strung along wooden beams, a glowing faux fireplace near the back, and soft notes of "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas" playing from an old speaker. But tonight, something had changed. The air felt charged with quiet magic, not nostalgia, but return and renewal. The door chimed softly. Adrian Wolfe stepped inside. His long, dark coat carried dustings of snow. As he removed it, revealing a charcoal sweater and wool scarf, there was an ease in his posture that hadn't been there the year before. He glanced around, not searching, but remembering, until his eyes settled on the corner table. And he stopped. There, seated at the very table where he once sat beside an empty chair, was someone waiting. Lila Grace. She sat where he once did, golden hair curling gently around her shoulders, loose and natural. She wore a hand-knitted forest green sweater, slightly uneven at the seams but beautiful. Beside her sat the familiar canvas tote, now stitched with a new logo, Dreams in Thread. She was reading, a simple paperback worn at the edges. A mug of hot chocolate steamed beside her. Adrian smiled and walked over. Lila looked up. When she saw him, her face lit, not in surprise, but in certainty. He sat down across from her without needing to ask. "Been waiting long?" he asked, with a soft grin. "About a year," she replied, smiling. They both laughed, warm and easy. In the months between, their lives had transformed, but how they looked at each other now told a deeper story than words ever could. Lila was now a full-time fashion design student, studying on a scholarship funded anonymously, though both knew who stood behind it. Outside class, she ran sewing workshops for children from low-income neighborhoods. Her project, Dreams in Thread, wasn't just about making clothes, it was about giving kids belief in themselves. Adrian had stepped away from his tech empire. Quietly, no press, no drama. He handed the reins to his team and created the Canvas Project, a foundation offering resources to young artists, musicians, and designers. It was work his brother might have needed, might have thrived in. Lila had once questioned his decision. "You built something amazing," she'd told him. "I did," he replied. "But now, I want to build something honest." And now, here they were again. No pretense, no scripts, just two people who had stitched something new out of something broken. A waitress approached, smiling. "Would you like anything else?" Lila looked at Adrian, then turned to the waitress. "Yes," she said gently. "2 hot chocolates. This seat's no longer just for the rich." The words landed softly, echoing the night they met. But now they carried no sadness, only quiet joy. After the waitress left, Adrian reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small box wrapped in handmade paper, tied with silver thread. A simple card was attached. He didn't hand it to her. He placed it gently between them. Lila picked it up, read the note. "For the girl who taught me how to stitch life back together, one thread at a time." She held the box but didn't open it. Instead, she reached forward and gently rested her hand on his. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Outside, Silent Night began to play as snow thickened beyond the windows. Inside, 2 mugs of cocoa steamed. 2 hands rested together across a table, once marked by silence and distance, now filled with something whole. From the street, passers-by might glance into the softly glowing cafe and see them there. Just a man and a woman. Just warmth in winter. Just a quiet Christmas miracle. Thank you for joining us on this heartwarming journey of healing, hope, and the simple magic of being seen. If Lila and Adrian's story touched your heart, imagine how many more stories like theirs are waiting to be discovered. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the hype button to support soul-stirring stories where every tale is crafted to move, inspire, and remind you that even in the quietest corners, love can find its way. Your support means the world. Stay kind, stay hopeful, stay with us.